Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Interact podcast. My name is Josh Hanum. I am the co-founder and CEO at Interact. And today I am joined by Maiko Sakai, who is a quiz consultant. And we're going to have a fun time today just talking through different quizzes that you've worked on and the results of them, the downsides of quizzes sometimes, and the lessons that you can take away from quiz marketing, even if you don't end up using any sort of software like Interact. So thanks for being here. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, I am so happy to be here. We've been, trying to make this happen, so we're finally here. So let's get started.
Yeah, it's the good part of being busy. Um, so let's just jump right in. Tell me about like a recent quiz that you worked on with a client.
Yep,
What was the need? How did that need get solved using a quiz?
yep,
And what are the benefits? And then what are the drawbacks, if there were any, of using a
sure.
quiz?
So, I can share a few really quickly, back to back, and you stop me, if you have any questions or whatnot. But I will
Yeah.
start with the easy one, which is a kind of a typical one, meaning I worked with a business coach, specialized in really identifying people's or business owners superpower, so to speak, zone of genius. And sometimes that gets masked by something that they're kind of good at or whatever that might be. And she's tried different types of lead magnets. So her goal was to really work on something that she can be proud of and then she can, not really not stop talking about it so that instead of, her trying to push other lead magnets onto her prospects, she gets just to point to the quiz and say, find out about yourself. Because at the end of the day, if people are interested in helping your business, they would be happily take your survey. But the reality is that's not the case. They want to find out about themselves, not about your business. So that was a success case there, even though formulating the types of outcomes that she can offer to all sorts of nitty gritty kind of things was a lot of work. But that's a typical example, right? So if you're a wellness consultant or mindfulness meditation or performance coach, those are great businesses to consider a quiz as a marketing tool. So that's example number one. Example number two is my favorite. I worked with an activism duo. So that's not something that I usually encounter, but they were in this, they're part of this political movement. And they realized that most of the organizations that they encounter or they work with are not really maximizing their talent. So long story short, it was a leadership quiz, but they have done an extensive research on different types of leaderships under that context, under that particular setting, and identified 5 different archetypes. It was very unique. I've never seen any leadership quizzes like that. And I ended up suggesting them that once they launch it, they're about to do so now. Once they launch, don't end it there. They can create an ebook really outlining how they can use that data, different archetypes, different types of leaders. They're all leaders. So, they can do more of an assessment type of thing beyond the quiz. They can write an ebook. Even beyond that, they could use that framework for family dynamics, workplace dynamics. I mean, you name it, but they didn't see that in the beginning. They only saw it as what they wanted to utilize the quiz for, but I saw something way beyond that. I mean, this framework can work for any different settings. They didn't realize it. So we recently we recorded an interview about their experience creating their quiz. And I'm really excited to release that one because that was an interesting one. Now, the next one was, I had my innate desire to tackle more of a rigid, highly regulated industries. So I took on one client. She was in the insurance industry. Now, as you can imagine, there are a lot of protocols, regulations, compliance issues, all sorts of things. So we're trying to navigate that by creating a quiz about life insurance, specifically targeting stay-at-home moms. They may feel safe because of their husbands getting, the life insurance from their, work or whatever. It was more of an educational piece that actually you may want to rethink that kind of angle without really crossing the boundaries, right? Like all the regulations and protocols and all that stuff. Unfortunately, what happened to that was that, the people above her didn't think it was a good idea to move forward with it. So unfortunately, we had to scratch that idea. However, she learned how to create a high quality quiz. From that experience, she's ready to implement another one for a different business. So those are some of the examples.
Nice. Nice. I like those. And that's such a good rundown that just kind of exemplifies the journey that we've been on, that I've been on in researching quizzes, because that middle one that you're the most excited about is also the
Yep.
most exciting to me because of the deep framework that you're talking
Yeah.
about, like the psychological framework of archetypes, and that rabbit hole or whatever you want to call it just goes so far. Like,
Oh, yeah. Very
there's
deep.
huge amounts of research and books. I think I've probably read like 10 books on psychology in the last month that each takes on a different approach
Mm-hmm.
that relates back to a quiz. So tell me as much as you can or share
Mm-hmm.
publicly, like, what is that framework and where does it come from? What are
Yeah.
the psychological underpinnings of it?
Right.
And how did you relate it back to like the leaders in this case?
Yeah, so they were on the ground talking to actual people, at those various organizations, and some of the people who ended up leaving those organizations, what frustrated them, what didn't work, all sorts of things. So nothing was very theoretical, right? And like they were on the ground collecting data, and I spent about good 2 years or so. And once they identified 5 different types of leaderships that you don't hear about it from Deloitte or Bain or other places, you've never heard of those things. There's one, I would say 2 out of 5 archetypes are never discussed before, as far as I can tell. So they discovered something big there. And once they're done with the research, it started out as a research and didn't even think about a quiz at all. But one day they realized that what if we convert that into a format so that we can give it out to those organizations, have their people take it, then they can strategize what to do, what not to do. So like it was a real work that they've done. The only thing that I took sort of like instrumental role in helping them finish was to really articulate what those archetypes are, because one of them had a name for it that was kind of muddled. So I sent it back by saying that, you have to come up with a different name for that particular archetype. And, that was a very painful experience for them, but, they really stuck through and came up with an alternative that made so much more sense. So it comes down to that all subtle nuances, right? And it's just like, it just blows everybody's mind by just sticking through with it to perfect it.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. The specific like word choices, the way that you frame things, the way that you
Absolutely.
say things really matters,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
when it's like a quiz result because it's so personal, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what you said about gathering data for 2 years, I don't know the exact like timing, but it typically is something like that, like 1 to 5 years of gathering data, understanding the audience, and then kind of realizing like, okay, like my audience is generally like one of these 4 types or 6 types of
Yeah.
people, and those people have these attributes. How do you typically work with people when they come in with that data
Mm-hmm.
to help them refine it down to a quiz result that's like easily digestible, immediately recognizable by the quiz taker, scales up, so you could have thousands of people take the quiz. Like, what's your process to go from like that raw data
Hmm.
into something that's more refined?
Right. So I have this thing called the 10-step blueprint, and that was born out of my own experience creating my own quiz, right? When I created my own quiz for my business, I started from scratch. So I made all the mistakes. I mean, all the mistakes that I can possibly think of. So I created this step-by-step process that cannot be changed. It's in a specific order for a reason. I can reveal a little bit about it. It's all about reverse engineering. So don't bother quiz title. Don't even worry about it in the beginning. Don't worry about what kind of questions you're going to ask. None of those things. It comes from the outcomes that you have in mind, right? Because if that's not solidified, then everything's going to fall down. So in any given moment when a new client comes through, I will put them through that basically just to do a quick check on it to see how solidified their archetypes are. And I may not be an expert in that particular sector or industry, like in insurance or legal or manufacturing, or even some kind of like a medical related health or something like that. I don't need to be an expert of it. I can spot the weak areas of their theory when it comes to not only their framework but also the types of outcomes, and I get to say, what about that type of people or that type of behavior or that type of business, and make sure that they cover them all, right? Sometimes how wide you set your spectrum can be challenging. Like, for example, if you are doing some kind of a personality type of quiz, but that you only cater to, like, say, 3 out of 7 outcomes, right? You don't cater to the rest of 4 or something like that. Will you or will you not include the rest of 4 different archetypes that you may have identified, but you don't cater to? It really depends. Sometimes it's a yes. Like for my quizzes, it was a yes, only because I wanted to showcase my depth of understanding when it comes to business owners' behaviors, right? So I had to include the full spectrum. Now, there's an opposite example. This marketer, I worked with her. She specializes in helping business owners that are somewhat introverted. So when it comes to marketing, she has a different solution for them because she is also an introverted marketer. So her quiz only houses different types of introverted business owners and don't even touch anybody else. Semi-extroverted, I think they're called ambivert, I believe, or extroverted people. That's the spectrum that the parameters, if you will, that she set. It really, really depends. It can get down to that nitty gritty that not many people actually talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And those little changes between like, do you include everybody? Do you not
Mm-hmm.
include everybody? Showing understanding, like you said. I had a question that popped up while you were talking there that is interesting to me, which is in those cases where you're not an expert in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really fascinating to me because then it forces you to look at it from like a assessor lens.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the things that you spot when you're looking at the content of a quiz in
Mm-hmm.
an area where you're not the expert, but you can immediately tell something's off?
Right.
Like, what are the things that are typically off? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's a question that people always ask is like, well, what's off about my quiz? And I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah, a handful of things, but I normally start from their target market and their behaviors. So, like for example, with an insurance, right? It's a boring subject. Let's not sugarcoat it. Not everybody wants to talk about it all the time at a dinner table. I mean, it's not a topic, right? Let's face it. But most of the time, unless like a business insurance, so I'm talking about more of a like a regular people insurance, so whether it's a life or the home owners insurance, to that sort of stuff. I wanted to see who would be taking that quiz and match them up with what they have currently to spot gaps or even some themes that are working against them. So that's the first start. I wanted to spot some gaps between their quiz and who they're targeting. Would they even touch that, right? Would they even click that button to take that quiz? So that's a kind of a general place to get started with, right? But then I would look into what are the questions that they have for that particular quiz. Are they curiosity inducing? If somebody's taking that quiz, they just can't wait to get to the next question just because it's just so interesting, curiosity inducing, and semi gamified. Now, when I say gamified, I use that term all the time because it's an integral part of quiz creation. However, I don't mean it to be funny or fun. That's not what I mean by gamification. I just wanted to make sure a quiz can drive people through the entire process because it's gamified, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those
Yeah.
are the two things that I would look at first. But then, obviously I would look at the archetypes and see if they're, even, interesting enough. What are those names that they came up with? Or, are they too obvious? Being obvious is something that you absolutely wanted to avoid, when it comes to quiz creation, because if they know which direction they're heading, why would they finish a quiz?
Right. And that's that curiosity aspect that jumped out at me from what you were saying is curiosity inducing, and it means something different depending on who your audience is and
Yep.
what they care about. But are there any principles that you generally look at when you're thinking about what is going to build curiosity, that principles that go across all industries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it starts with obviously the quiz title because that's what the first thing that your target market. Let's just say you have a quiz, right? And your target market would look at whether you're promoting over social media or you're running paid ads for it or whatever. Is that even curiosity inducing, right? So like for example, there was a quiz that was created by a pretty prominent big heavyweight marketer. He took it down already. I respected him dearly, so this is not for me to knock him in any way, like or to knock his quiz, not at all, because he himself said it afterwards. But the title was what is your blind spot in your business, or somewhere along the line. It doesn't exist anymore because it was already taken down. It didn't do all that well. And why do you think that? I'm kind of curious to see, like, why do you think that title wasn't really working?
Yeah, I mean, my immediate thought would be it's too generic, and
Mm-hmm.
like people people don't want like what's wrong in
Exactly.
general.
Yeah, bingo.
They'll want like something very specific, because as you go about your day, you're not thinking about like, oh, what's the blind spot in my business? You're thinking about like, oh, why is like my website not
Not working,
converting,
right? Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Or
exactly.
why did this ad not convert? Or why am I getting more cancellations this month, right? Like super specific things.
All of that.
Is
Yeah,
that your thought?
yeah, exactly. So let's just say that the quiz itself was jam packed with value. You really don't get people to click on the button to take the quiz because of this tiny word, blind spot. You don't get excited about that word, right? Let's be honest. Blind spot? Yeah, maybe some other time, right? But
Hmm.
what if you change that title to be discover your hidden revenue potential that you can tap into today?
Mm-hmm.
It's saying the same thing, right? Because the whole reason of identifying the blind spots are for business owners to improve those areas. But what if we can make it to be more enticing that, discover your hidden revenue potential? It's the same thing. So,
Right.
you touched on the psychology side of quiz creation, or even the marketing in general. It is all about psychology, right? What are their desires? What do they secretly want that they don't want to reveal to the public? For example, it comes down to that deep. If you wanted to make it work, so we can touch on a little bit of the use of AI and all that stuff, but you can't just throw an idea into a chat GPT and whatever it spits out to be the final product. I always say that's where the work begins. It's a great start. I don't stop you from it, but you know, you can't create a prompt with something you don't know. So if you don't know that it requires this depth of understanding, your prompts may not be all that on point, right? So,
Right. Yeah. I like that phrase that you had, secret desires. It almost sounds like over the top, but it's not really because
no?
that is kind of it, right? Like you want to get at what is it that somebody's like maybe not even aware of themselves
Mm-hmm.
that they like really want or that they really don't want or some dream that they have and you want to almost know the person better than they know themselves to be
Exactly.
able to address that thing and then that's going to capture their attention. Like
Yep.
you have to get down to that nitty gritty level.
It's so funny that you mentioned it because that was one of, like, I actually have a screenshot of that. Somebody took my quiz and feedback that she posted over social media, which I didn't ask her to do so, was it was down to the T. I mean, I'm gasping because I feel like you know me better than I know myself. At the end of the day, that's what you want. And I always use this example of, the fitness, a trainer or coach or fitness, company, whatever. Somebody comes to them and say, I really wanted to lose weight. And they may ask, well, why, right? And as you know, you have to ask why a few times to get to that innate desire, that secret desire that they really have. Well, she might tell them that, well, I just wanted to be healthy for my family, so I wanted to lose weight. Okay, but I mean, really, why? Is there anything else, right? And she might say, well, well, that's what everybody expects. I wanted to be fit so that I can look good, I can get more, better job opportunities, or, I can be healthier. But all those things are kind of a politically correct answers. But as you go along with the whole conversation with the family dynamics and all of it, at the end, she finally admits, well, the family reunion, I can't if I can say the word, the family reunion is coming up this summer. And I just want to make my cousin jealous.
Yeah.
Boom. Right? So
Yeah. And
you wanted
that's
to
the
get through that.
thing. I know you have to get there. And I think if you can get there, the thing about a quiz that's interesting, I'm sure you've seen this too, it's like it is very personal. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's not weird if you address the elephant in the room like the fitness example you just gave. It's not weird if you have that incorporated into the quiz because it is a one-on-one conversation
Exactly.
and at least within the Interact platform that data
Mm-hmm.
is private. Like
Yep.
it's private between you and the person that created the quiz if you choose to share it with them. And so and sometimes I mean you can even leave it completely anonymous, so
Mm-hmm.
you can do this thing that's like a diagnostic or personality or whatever kind of quiz it is, and it's just you talking, so you don't have to worry about like if you were to write a blog article about that, let's say, I don't know that that would necessarily go anywhere because
Mm-hmm.
it's like uh, it's not really personal. And so you can get into that like specific thing. I really like that example. I think that that gets at the heart of what differentiates a good quiz from a generic one,
Exactly.
and the generic ones never work. They like the blind spot example.
Yep.
It just falls flat.
Yeah.
Whereas the ones that are like really they get straight to the heart of the issue,
Hmm.
they work exceptionally well. Any like frameworks or
Hmm.
ways of processing that you go through with people
Yep.
to help break through the layers? Because I feel like most folks come in, I'd say the majority, not most, but the
Hmm.
majority of people come in with a generic idea for their quiz. Do you have any process that you walk them through to be like, all right, let's get past the generic. Let's get to that.
Hmm.
I want to look good for the family reunion question.
Right.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. My background is management consulting. So, I didn't start as a quiz consultant. I enjoy doing this work, so I took it and run with it, right? But my background is management consulting. So oftentimes, funny enough, when my clients come through my door, then we start formulating this idea. Some of them already have an idea, some of them don't. Either way, I take them in. We ended up having a business model conversation. Why? Because if their quiz idea is generic, the chances are their business model is also generic, right? And before I was doing this quiz consulting, oftentimes I helped my clients with discovering their unique niche that is profitable. And that's one of my quizzes. It's called Discover Your Hidden Profitable Niche, right? And those two words, hidden and profitable, they go really well as a quiz title, by the way. But anyway, I question a lot of things like, okay, so, this quiz really targeting like multiple different personas that you may or may not cater to. Like, what is your business model? That's how deep it goes in. It's not a framework per se, but I have a tendency of spotting those weak areas or like some of the gaps. So I get into nitty gritty of it. Like, do you even want to work with these people? Or you can keep that as one of the archetypes, but you might want to make sure that your questions are spot on so that your quiz will be super accurate. There's a process in the part of the 10-step blueprint where, we would have beta test. That could have been step number 7 or 8, I forget. But what I always say about that is that try to break your quiz. Don't go gentle with it. The whole process, like the whole purpose of a beta testing is to break it just to find out whether your quiz is really like, solid and accurate, right? So give it to anybody and everybody and see if the outcomes, like see what they have to say about it. Oh, it was spot on, or I didn't really think of it that way, but now come to think of it, I think that's spot on. Then your quiz is good, right? Your quiz is gold. But if somebody comes back and says, it doesn't even sound like me, well, there's an issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's two funny points that I thought of as you're talking. First one is I feel like a quiz is almost like a mirror reflecting back to you your business, and all the flaws will show if you're trying to
Yes.
build something. If you're trying to build a quiz, like it's just going to show you all the gaps, all the holes that you have because you can't fake it. It's like such
Yeah.
a personal, intimate thing
Yeah.
that like if anything about your business is off, it's gonna be obvious and your quiz is not gonna be able to be done. And then the second part of that, which parlays from the first part, is you do have to try to break the quiz, but that's also putting a mirror in front of your
That's
business and
right.
asking people to tell you what's wrong, and it requires a high level of humility. I mean, like,
It
I
does.
think I can't tell you I mean, I can tell you, and like this is sort of calling out our customers, but like our customers always want to get feedback from us.
Hmm.
And the reason why is they don't want to show it to anybody else. And
Right.
it's like, if you don't show it to the people that you want to have take it and then let them tell you what's wrong with it, to me, it's not just a quiz problem, that's a business problem. Like, your whole business has to be on display and you have to listen to what people have to say. Now, of course, if they're not the right people,
Right.
like it's just your mean neighbor or whatever, like
Right.
don't listen to them. But if it's somebody that's your ideal customer and they're telling you, hey, like this doesn't work for me, you have to listen. Like,
Right.
well, you don't
Right.
have to, but you'll just go out of business if you don't. Like, you cannot
It's
survive
critical.
without listening.
Right. So in a way, a quiz creation, as you said in the beginning of this, interview, whether you decide to use it or not, it can be a great litmus test, right? Just to really validate your business model, who you're catering to, all of those things. So even if you don't use it, it's a great exercise. Not that I would encourage anybody to go that far, not to use it, of course. I want them to use it, but I don't think a lot of people would view it that way. I mean, I've taken somebody else's quiz recently, and he is well known in the industry. What blew my mind was that all the answers for his quiz was yes, somewhat, no. I mean, like, really? You leaving money on the table? That is ridiculous. I mean, in my book, it is almost criminal. Like, you don't do that, you know? And
Right.
it's like, it just leaves so much room for not errors, people lying. That's another thing that you wanted to really pay attention to. Are you crafting your questions in a way that they can't lie about themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you write it in a certain way, right, it's going to resonate so much with people that they'll immediately see an answer and know exactly which one is the right. I was just listening to, let's see, what was the book? Purposeful Curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
I think is the name of the book. It's a really good book by a professor out in London. And one of the stories in there is about surveys where people immediately know which answer applies to them. If you can't write questions where it's immediate and yes, no, sometimes, and nobody immediately knows that answer because it's never yes, no, or sometimes.
Right.
The truth is, it's yeah, maybe like on the weekends I feel this way, but on Tuesday morning I don't. If you ask somebody like, "Oh, how much do you get excited to go on a walk?" Right? Like
Yeah.
it's different depending on the scenario, and if your answer is just yes, no sometimes, then you're not actually gathering any good data, and it's just kind of a cop out, right? Like
Yep.
you're not doing the work to really understand what would my audience say, what are the words that they would use, and doing the research to understand what would my audience say, what words would they use. You can repurpose that everywhere.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you can use those same words in your marketing copy, in your emails, in your website. And something that's interesting to me, and I think a good thing, even though I think it's just a good thing overall, is I was talking to somebody yesterday that is also helping people with quizzes. And I was basically telling that person it's fine with us if somebody uses a quiz for 2 years and then they learn so much about their audience that their whole website just kind of becomes very hyper personalized and they don't even need the quiz anymore because it's just such a seamless experience
Mm-hmm.
that you don't need to use it anymore. That's great. That's kind of the whole point. Like,
Yeah.
we're just trying to create a conduit where people can connect more effectively
Yep.
with their audience is just kind of what this is all about. And
Yeah.
so it's cool the frameworks that you have for helping people bridge that gap, like move across that divide of
Yeah,
like,
it's all about digging deep so that the framework itself is built for, to just do that. So the funny enough, I don't think she minds if I say this, but uh, one of them cried in the van because I keep
mm,
sending it back. Like, No, you can do better than this. No, you can do better than this. Let's just peel one more layer back and see where we're going to land, right? Like, for example, a lot of those like business related quizzes has a question. What is your current struggle? Like, if I see that question one more time, I will lose my mind. In your term, that's a cop out. There are so many different ways to ask the same question without using that word struggle. Because every time, it's not that the word struggle is bad, but let's just put ourselves in their shoe. And we're looking at this question. What is your current struggle in your business? We're gonna almost feel like the whole, the deer in the headlight moment, right? Because there's so many things. There could be many things, different degrees, and we are forced to choose an answer. How accurate is it? It's not.
Yeah. Well, there's too many problems with that question, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that comes to mind for me is how does that make the quiz taker feel? Like, how somebody's not going to feel great if you're asking them, like, what's your struggle? But if you can align alongside them and ask that same question in a different way where it's
Yep.
not posed as like, you problem, me solution, which creates a divide, right? And nobody responds well to a divide. People
Absolutely.
respond well to a connection. And then I'm the expert. I can help you move through to where you're trying to go.
Yep.
But a question that creates a divide like that, and there's so many examples of that, right? Like, I'm sure you see it all the time. People asking super generic things, asking questions that are on every quiz. There's no differentiation. There's no uniqueness. There's no like knowledge of the audience, because you got to ask that question in the exact way that your audience would say it. And I don't think any audience actually phrases things that way. Like, what are you currently struggling with? I've never overheard a conversation where someone asked that question to another person
Right.
when they're sitting and having a drink or whatever. Like, and it's not going to work just because it's on the internet. And so,
Exactly. Well, most of the time, on average, I spend 1 hour at a minimum just by rearranging the order of questions alone. Why? As you said, it's an experience. You're not just pushing them through that, the funnel, shoving them down this conveyor belt to get to the other side of it, right? The experience matters. So most of the time, we rearrange the order of questions multiple times. I have a formula for it as well.
yep. Yeah, that is another really important aspect to this, is the stacking of how you ask things, which, you're emulating a conversation that you'd have in
Right.
person, and you don't go into a conversation right off the bat being like, what's the worst thing that happened to you this week? Even if you do want to ask that at some point,
Right.
you're going to open up with something that's more conversational, that's lighter, that is easier to answer. You don't know where the other person's coming from. Maybe they had a long commute, or they just got home after a long day, or
Right.
whatever it is when they're taking your quiz. You don't want to just hit them with something really heavy right off the bat. So you do have to have that formula, and that's cool that you have thought through that level. That's definitely something that I notice when I'm taking really well crafted quizzes, is you can tell there's an arc to how these questions are asked. There's an arc to the way the information is being gathered,
Yep.
which, to your point earlier on, it does indicate to you as the quiz taker that something's happening. Like, you're aware, like, okay, I can see that something's happening here, but it's not so obvious that you're like, oh, well, this is just telegraphing it. I can tell exactly where this is going. Which is also a really cool psychological science, I think
Yeah.
that can be really, really powerful. So, this is all like super interesting.
Yeah, it can
We
go
should,
on and on.
I know. I'll have to have you back on, and we'll continue the conversation. But we should
Absolutely.
probably wrap up around here. We try to keep these around 40 minutes so people can
Yep.
listen while they're on a walk or whatever. But thanks for coming on. Where can people go if they want to work with you, go through your framework, and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah. So anyone can download that 10-step blueprint. That's so important to me that I want everybody to have it even before we may even have a conversation about it, right? So go to my website. It's listed, under this frame there, maikosakai.com, and it's on the first page. You can download it. It's a PDF. Go through the process so that you don't waste your time nor energy, for it. And yeah, you can reach out to me over LinkedIn or X or IG. Like most of the social medias, I'm around. So if you have any questions, just send me a message. And yeah, we go from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. This is a great conversation. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.